Hi guys! Today I will tell you about the chapter A Fire on the Hearth. Outside the house, close to the log wall opposite the door, Pa cut away the grass and scraped the ground smooth. He was getting ready to build the fireplace. Then he and Ma put the wagon box on the wheels again, and Pa hitched up Patty and Pat. The rising sun was shortening all the shadows. Hundreds of meadow larks were rising from the prairie, singing higher and higher in the air. Their songs came down from the great clear sky like a rain of music, and all over the land where the grasses waved and murmured under the wind, thousands of little dicky birds clung with their tiny claws to the blossoming weeds and sang the thousands of little songs. Pat and Patty sniffed the wind and wind with the joy. They arched their necks and pawed at the ground because they were eager to go. Pat was whistling while he climbed to the wagon seat and took up the reins. Then he looked down at Laura, who was looking up at him, and he stopped whistling and said, "When to go along, Laura? You and Mary." Ma said they could. They climbed up, the wheels clicking to the spokes with their barred toes, and they sat on the high wagon seat beside Pa. Pat and Patty started with a little jump, and the wagon went jolting down the road that Pa's wagon wheels had made. They went down between the bare, reddish-yellow walls of earth, all reached and wrinkled by forgotten rains. Then they went on, across the rolling land of the creek bottoms. Masses of trees covered some of the low, rounded hills, and some of them were grassy, open spaces. Deer were lying in the shadows of the trees, and deer were grazing in the sunshine on the green grass. They lifted their hands and pricked their ears and stood chewing and watching the wagon with their soft, large eyes. All along the road, the wild lark spur was blossoming. Pink and blue and white birds balanced on yellow plums of goldenrod, and butterflies were fluttering. Starry daisies lighted the shadows under trees. Squirrels chattered on branches overhead. White-tailed rabbits hopped along the road, and snakes ripped quickly across it when they heard the wagon coming. Deep in the lowest valley, the creek was running. In the shadow of the bluffs, when Laura looked up the bluffs, she couldn't see the prairie grass at all. Trees grew up the bluffs where the earth had crumbled, and where the bare dirt was so steep the trees couldn't grow on it. Bushes held on desperately with their roots. Half-necked roots were high above Laura's head. "Where are the Indian camps?" Laura asked Pa. He had seen the Indians desert camps here among the bluffs, but he was too busy to show them to her now. He must get to the rocks to build the fireplace. "You girls can play," he said, "but don't go out of my sight, and don't go into the water, and don't play with snakes. Some of snakes down here are a poison." So Laura and Mary played by the creek, while Pa dug the rocks he wanted and lowered them into the wagon. They watched long-legged water bugs skate over the glassy still pools. They ran along the bank to scare the frogs, and laughed when the green-coated frogs with their white vests plopped into the water. They listened to the wood pigeons call among the trees, and the brown thrush singing. They saw the little minnows swimming all together in the shallow places where the creek ran sparkling. The minnows were thin gray shadows in the rippling water. Only now and again, when minnow flashed the sunshine from its silvery belly. There was no wind along the creek. The air was still and drowsy warm. It smelled of damp roots and mud, and it was full of the sound of rustling leaves and of the water running. In the muddy places where deer's tracks were thick and every hoof print held water, swarms of mosquitoes rose up with a keen, sharp buzzing. Laura and Mary slapped at mosquitoes on their faces and necks and hands and legs and wished they could go wading. They were so hot and the water looked so cool. Laura was sure that it wouldn't do not harm just to dip one foot in. And when Pa's back was turned, she almost did it. Laura, said Pa, and he snatched the nasty foot back. If you girls want to go wading, Pa said, you can do it in the shallow place. Don't go in over your ankles. Mary waded only a little while. She said the gravel hurt her feet, and she sat on a log and patiently slapped at mosquitoes. But Laura slapped and kept on wading. Then she stepped. The gravel hurt her feet. When she stood still, the tiny minnows swarmed about her toes and nibbled them with their tiny mouths. It was a funny, squiggling feeling. Laura tried and tried to catch a minnow, but she only got the hem of her dress wet. Then the wagon was loaded. Pa called, come along, girls, and they climbed to the wagon seat again and rode away from the creek up through the woods, arid hills. They rode again to the high prairie, where the winds were always blowing and the grasses seemed to sing and whisper and laugh. They had had a wonderful time in the creek bottoms, but Laura liked the high prairie best. The prairie was so wide and sweet and clean. That afternoon, Ma sat sewing in the shade of the house, and baby Carrie played on the quilt beside her, while Laura and Mary watched Pa build the fireplace. Then he mixed clay and water to a beautiful thick mud. In the Mustang's water bucket, he let Laura stir the mud while he laid a row of rocks around the sides of the space he had cleared by the house wall, and with a wooden paddle he spread the mud over the rocks. In the mud he laid another row of rocks and plastered them over the top and down on the inside with more mud. He made a box on the ground, and the sides of the box were made of rocks and mud, and the other side was the log wall of the house, with rocks and mud, and more rocks and more mud. He built the walls as high as Laura's chin. Then on the walls close against the house, he laid a log. He plastered the log all over with mud. After that, he built up rocks and mud on top of the log. He was making the chimney now, and he made it smaller and smaller. He had to go to the creek for more rocks. Laura and Mary could not go again because Ma said the damp air might give them a fever. Mary sat beside Ma and sewed another block of her 9-patch quilt, but Laura mixed another bucketful of mud. Next day, Pa built a chimney as high as the house wall. Then he stood and looked at it. He ran his fingers through his chairs. You look like a wild man, Charles, Ma said. You're setting your hair all on end. It stands on end anyway, Carlin. Pa answered. When I was courting you, it never would lie down. No matter how much I slicked it with bare grease, he threw himself down on the grass at her feet. I'm plump, he cried out, lifting rocks up there. You've done well to build the chimney up. You're so high all by yourself. Ma said. She ran her hand through his hair and stood it up more than ever. Why don't you make it straight and dab the rest of the way? She asked him. Well, it would be easier, he admitted. Um, I'm blamed if I don't believe I will. He jumped up, Ma said. Oh, stay here in the shade and rest a while. But he shook his head. No use lazying here while there's work be done, Carolyn. The sooner I get the fireplace done, the sooner you can do your cooking inside, out of the wind. He hauled saplings from the woods, and he cut and notched them, and laid them up like the walls of the house on top of the stone chimney. As he laid them, he plastered them well with mud, and that finished the chimney. Then he went into the house, and with his axe and saw cut made a hole in the wall. He cut away the logs that had made the fourth wall at the bottom of the chimney, and there was the fireplace that was large enough for Laura and Mary and baby Carrie to sit in. Its bottom was the ground that Pa had cleared of grass, and its front was the space where Pa had cut away the logs. Across the top of the space was the log that Pa had plastered all over with mud. On this side, Pa packed a thick slab of oak against the cut ends of the logs. Then by the upper corners of the fireplace he packed chunks of oak to the wall, and on these he laid an oak slab and packed it firmly. That was the mantel shelf. As soon as it was done, Ma sat in the middle of the mantel shelf by the little China woman she had brought from the big woods. The little China woman had come all the way and had not been broken. She stood on the mantel shelf with her little China shoes and her white China skirts and her tight China booties, and her pink cheeks are beautiful cheeks are and blue eyes and golden hair, all made of china. Then Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura stood and admired that fireplace. Only Carrie did not care about it. She pointed at the little China woman and yelled when Mary and Laura told her no one but Laura could touch it. You have to be careful with your fire, Caroline, Ma said. We don't want spark going up the chimney to the roof on the fire. That cloth would burn easily. I'll split out some clapboard as soon as I can, and make a roof you won't have to worry about. So Ma carefully built a little fire in a new fireplace, and she roasted a prairie hen of supper. And that evening they ate in the house. They sat at the table by the western window. Pa had quickly made the table of two slabs of oak. One end of the slab stuck in a crack of the wall, and the other end rested on short, upright logs. Pa had smoothed the slabs with his axe, and the table was very nice when Ma spread a cloth over it. The chairs were chunks of big logs. The floor was the earth that Ma had swept clean with her willow bough broom. On the floor in the corners the beds were neat under their patchwork quilts. The ray of the setting sun came through the window and filled the house with golden light. Outside, and far, far away to the pink edge of the sky, the wind The wind went blowing and the wild grasses waved. Inside, the house was pleasant. The gut roast chicken was juicy in Laura's mouth. Her hands and face were washed. Her hair was combed. Her napkin was tied around her neck. She sat up straight on the round end of log and used her knife and fork nicely, as Ma had taught her. She did not say anything because children must not speak at table until they are spoken to. But she looked upon Ma and Mary and baby Carrie in Ma's lap, and she felt content. It was nice to be living in a house again. And thank you for listening to me. This is the end of my chapter today. Goodbye. See you next video.